Hi, everyone, and welcome to another powerful conversation with another powerful woman. I am delighted to be joined by Nadine today. We've had a couple of really great talks, and I'm really excited that she's here to join me. But I will let you introduce yourself, Nadine. So if you'd like to tell us who you are, what you do, that would be great.
Hello. Yeah, sure. So I am currently a piano teacher and performer and a Romana's Pilates teacher. So historically, I trained as a pianist. I started playing at the age of 5 and then went to music college. 5 years later, got a master's degree in performance and then pursued a concert career where I played as a soloist, chamber musician, and I've always loved piano teaching. I was blessed to have a wonderful piano teacher called Judith Burton for 10 years before music college. And the way that she taught really inspired me. So from the first opportunity, I was teaching piano and really interested in passing on a love of music to people who wanted to learn. Then after a certain amount of time, as you do in the industry, you're trying to find your identity. And, you know, in the early days when you're sort of spat out of music college and you take on any work that comes your way. And then over time, you become more discerning. And I found that my love of performing was really in chamber music, which I continued with. I played with a couple of professional trios. And as a teacher, my identity as a teacher wavered. I found that the notion of teaching for excellence didn't excite me. I know the work involved. I know how people are pushed, and all too often people's love of music goes by the wayside when they're pushing that hard to enter the profession. And I just decided that wasn't me as a teacher. It's like there are a handful of people who go that way, and for those people, I'm delighted to help them. But for everybody else, I just wanted to instill a love of the piano, you know, in them or for them. So that was one avenue I wasn't certain about. And then my husband, Paul Cavacciuti, is a wonderful music educator, and he works with children with special educational needs, children who are blind, with autism. And he works very, very therapeutically. He teaches the piano and the drums, but in that area, that's his expertise. So he's passed on a lot of that to me. I mean, in fact, without going into too long a story, I believe he saved my love of music, actually. And I think if it weren't for him, I probably converted to something else completely. I met him shortly after leaving music college. And so I adopted some of these into my teaching. In fact, it changed my teaching hugely. I learned how to improvise, play jazz, pass that on to students, as well as teaching classically and from notation, but again, didn't fully embrace it. So I was in this sort of halfway house of not quite knowing where my identity was as a piano teacher. And then one night I stayed awake. It was one of those light bulb moments. It's really cheesy, but it was true, where I couldn't decide what I wanted to do with my future. I had a cousin close to me who'd invested a huge amount of time and money into changing his career, and it was a success. And it inspired me. And I thought, if I could retrain and if I could do anything I wanted, what am I really fascinated by? And I realized it was the mechanics of the human body. I've always been really interested in how the body works, how it moves. You know, as a professional pianist, I've often had a physiotherapy session, you know, once a month or once every 2 months, not because there's anything wrong with my body, but I just want to check in, make sure everything's working okay. I want to learn about it. So I considered retraining as an osteopath or physiotherapist, but realized that kind of medical training would take me right away from my musical career, which I didn't want. So in the end, at the time, I'd been doing Pilates for 5 years and loving it. You know, as a client, I enjoyed my weekly mat classes. I did a studio session once a fortnight or once a month with the same teacher. I was getting really into it. I was practicing at home, and that was my light bulb moment. I thought, if I could teach Pilates, then it'll give me knowledge of the human body and an ability to help people with their body and help practicing musicians in such a way that, you know, I feel satisfied and I'm sort of passing on something hopefully a little bit different. So after that, to their credit, my Pilates teacher at the time, who was body control trained, and she trained with APPI as a chartered physiotherapist. That's an extra training that they have. Both her and my husband said, do your homework, look at other teachers, look at other methods, see what's out there before you decide who you want to train with. And according to my tradition of being a classical musician and always going back to the source and, looking at original scores and learning music from the 1800s, I thought, I want to know who Joe Pilates was. I want to learn as close to his method as I possibly can, because naturally on people's death, methods change, they evolve, they go into different directions. So I started Googling, researching, and I found a studio in North London called Kinetic Pilates that had an apprenticeship program to train in this method called Romana's Pilates, which was a classical method. And at that time, I didn't even know there was such a thing as classical Pilates. And in truth, there kind of shouldn't be. The Pilates method is the Pilates method. But anyway, that's what it was. And I booked an appointment to have a session with the owner, Rebecca Convey, and I've never looked back. I went for a session back in February in 2019, and I learned more in that 55-minute session with her than I had done for the 5 years previous with my other teacher.
Wow.
She was fantastic, but this was very different. I realized that the Pilates method is a very specific method, and what I'd been doing wasn't really that. And I learned more about the mechanics of my body and why I had the problems I had and how they could change over time. So right there and then I was ready to sign myself up. I said, right, I'd love to do the apprenticeship program. How do I do it? And Rebecca said, well, you have to become a client. You have to show commitment to the work. If the program starts, the next one starts in September. So you have 6 months, which isn't that long. But if you come a couple of times a week, if you train hard, then, you can, be in the studio, let the apprentices here teach you. Then I think you can be ready. And I did. In fact, wow. I bought my reformer. It's the first piece of Pilates apparatus I bought, I think, a month later or 2 months later. So that, it took a bit of negotiation with my husband to get it into the house and find space for it. And I trained hard and then started the apprenticeship in September 2019. So that training took 2.5 years. It's over 1,200 hours of studio time, of observation, of practice, of having sessions, weekly sessions yourself. I did with Rebecca and other teachers in the studio, and practice, just lots of it. 7 exams later, and I'm finally a fully comprehensive level 5 Romana's Pilates teacher.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really quite a journey. It's hard to know even where to start with my questions, because part of me has a curiosity around the music side and following that, and not pushing people to taking away their joy of music by forcing them to, Yes. But then also, I suppose what I was hearing when you were talking about, I don't know if you're aware of that Japanese concept called ikigai, where you have like this intersections of, this is your passion, this is the thing that you have skills in, this is where you could make money, and this is how you can like change the world. And that intersection of all 4 of those parts is your ikigai, your what you could do. So as I was hearing you tell that story, that's kind of what I was like, yeah, Nadine's really sort of like picked up on what her ikigai is there from that whole journey. It's just a beautiful example of following a passion and a curiosity and developing skills and then a business around it.
It's interesting that I think it's a blessing to be able to bring those things together, and for a working life to be in balance, where those what were they? Passion, skill set,
but like the difference you can make in the world, and then how you can make money.
Yeah, that's right. those 4 things to keep them in balance is very, very difficult. And it's a constant. I'll say it, it's a struggle, you know, and I'm sure every single self-employed person on the planet would agree that to maintain that balance is very difficult. And I once had a physics teacher at school. Actually, I say physics teacher, he was my form teacher in sixth form. And it was at the time you have to start thinking about your career choices and, you know, and I'd been up and down like a yo-yo. I mean, I say all this like I had a clear path, but actually I was blessed with parents who were very free and, you know, liberal about what I could do in the future. You know, I wasn't sort of pushed into music. I guess I was, you know, under the surface, but actual, you know, the words out of their mouths were, you can do anything. You know, think about what you want to do. So, I mean, I love art. I considered architecture. You know, I went through a phase of wanting to be a medic, you know, and that was when I was making my A-level choices, which was a disaster. So I actually took biology and chemistry A-level, which I was terrible at. But at the you know, I started them and then slightly regretted them, and then just decided to get by in the days when schools kind of let you did that. You know, I came out in biology A-level, awful, quit chemistry, but then got 2 A's in music A-level because I realized, oh no, I want to be a pianist. This is my thing. You know, I got into it. And my dear form teacher, Mr. Rutherford, he was called, and he spoke to me once and he said, Nadine, have you considered that your relationship to music may change for the worse if you start to have to make money doing it? And at the time I fobbed him off and no, it's fine. No, it won't happen. I was so sure of myself, but his words have always stayed with me. And it's true. It's true. You enter a profession, and as a self-employed person, we have our passions and our ideals of what we want to achieve. But the reality is we need to make money. And it's very, very hard to turn down work that is secure or work that goes slightly against what you want to do or even what you believe in, because you need to live. And actually, if we can keep if we're blessed enough to have the position where we can keep our mind on what we want to achieve and what really excites us, and actually spend our time working on the thing itself, then I believe everything else does take care of itself. I think in a way we get pulled out of balance when we start doing what we do because we need to make money, or doing what we do because we want to create an image for ourselves, you know, in vanity, or doing what we do, I mean, I suppose for the same reason, because we're trying to find a gap in the market or whatever it is. But actually, if you're really passionate about the thing that your endeavor, you know, in my fairy tale world, I think that those other things fall into place. It's obviously real life kicks in and there are problems and it's not always possible for people. You know, but if anybody's in that position, they're very lucky. And I count myself as being very lucky. I'm really in that position, you know, with a few tumbles along the way. But,
Do you think, how do you think that might have been different if you didn't have like a natural ability to play the piano, for example?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't know. I mean, in reality, the piano wasn't really my first choice. I had an aptitude for it. My parents moved to Ewell in Surrey when I was 3, and the house they bought had a grand piano in it that the owners just wanted to leave behind because it was old. And that was my first encounter with the piano. But at the time, like every kid, I did other stuff. You know, I swam, I did ballet, I was at Brownies. And the thing I loved the most was swimming, actually. I really adored, I mean, I lived for the water. I absolutely adored swimming. I think had I had my choice, I'd have been a swimmer. I mean, if somebody had said to me, you have to swim for an hour every day before school, and then you have to train at the weekends, I'd have been all over it. I'd have absolutely loved it. I used to dive into my sofa and pretend I was diving into water. How sad is that? But I loved it. And I remember that my parents hit hard times financially, you know, when I was about 8. And they said to me, okay, you've got to choose one thing that you can carry on with. And I remember the moment they said it, I went swimming. And they were like, are you sure, darling? But you're so good at the piano. And they taught me round. They taught me into carrying on with the piano. And yeah, I did. And I also, when you talk about, you know, so if you had having a natural affinity, I loved jazz. I didn't really know what jazz was, but I loved jazz musicals. I think because that's what my parents had in the house, played in the house mostly. And so I love to mess around at the piano. I love to play creatively. I love to do my own thing, as most kids do.
Yeah.
And this wonderful teacher that I described earlier, Judith Burton, she was a classical teacher and very, very high powered, so from the age of 8, I started at the age of 5, but moved to her at the age of 8. And then she had me on a trajectory to become a classical performing pianist, so right from the beginning, it was all about performing in concerts, doing competitions, grade exams. She even held, and she still does, hold her own scales competition every year for her students, where they do adjudicator into her house and do scales and sight reading competitions to raise money for charity for Save the Children. So she takes it really seriously. And I was really pushed into that, and slightly against my will, actually. I had fights with my father at the piano. A few times I slammed the lid down and vowed I'd never play again. And of course that didn't happen. But I struggled. And so that's, earlier when I said, my choice was my own to be a musician. I think that the seed was sown very early on that was kind of what I was going to do. I think my father probably and my mother were living precariously through me, as is often the case.
Yeah. So what happened to swimming then?
Nothing. I stopped having lessons. And then I went recreationally. They took me, I think, once a week or once every couple of weeks, and I'd swim and I'd have the floats and I'd be with friends, and, I loved it. But I never continued lessons. I never learned how to swim properly. And it wasn't until I was an adult. At school we learned swimming, and again, I picked up a little bit there and again, loved it. But it's not something that I pursued at all. It's always been my hobby. Now I don't really do it very often. I think it's fallen out of my life. When I'm on holiday, the first thing I do is jump into the pool and, go into the sea and swim.
Yeah.
I've taught myself how to swim better using Alexander technique, I
suppose that's what I was going to ask about, if any of your work that you're doing now has now influenced your swimming.
Yeah, it really has. I'm not a swimmer. I wouldn't call myself a swimmer, and that I don't do it regularly. And I have a Pilates client who's really into it, and the way she talks about it, it's her passion, and it's not really mine anymore, other than it just being an occasional thing. But I have had moments in my life where I've addressed, things like front crawl used to make me feel tired, and I used to hate that because I wanted to do it better. So I read about it and I practiced it on holiday, and now I can do it with ease and I love it. And the Pilates, for sure, absolutely. The Pilates has improved my stroke and my speed effortlessly, because that's what Pilates does. People think of Pilates as an exercise method in its own right, which it is. But its purpose is to make everything else easier in everyday life. Yeah. There is a very deliberate connection between what you do in the studio with your teacher and how that relates to everything else that you do in life. And I've really felt it. I felt it with swimming, for sure. I felt it with walking and running. I don't run, but when I have, I implement Pilates, and it means I can run a little further. And for sure with my piano playing. That's the bit that's really blown my mind. Is that the stuff that I've struggled with technically at the instrument my whole life, where I've had to practice for hours and hours and hours to overcome something difficult. And, you put in 1,000 hours of work and you think, okay, I've got it. And then you have a few bad days and you're like, oh, I've lost it again. And then you do it again. And, you go through this permanent cycle of gradual improvement. And I've always wondered, like, why is this so hard? Why? Yes, I have play, but certain things, I've had tensions in my body that have never gone. I've had weaknesses in my body. I've noticed that when I start to really relax my wrists and my elbow and my shoulder joints, then my jaw tightens up, and Pilates has addressed that beautifully. It's made me realize why that happens. And now as an instructor and as somebody who's observed lots of people in the very short, 4 years I've been doing it, I'm starting to see why these things happen, and that it doesn't have to be difficult. We make it difficult because of our lives and our personality and our physiology.
Yeah. So I suppose what comes like approaching that from a coaching perspective, where I see that a lot of people are held back by beliefs they have about themselves, limiting beliefs, etc., that they maybe formed when they were a child. And having also just read Gabor Mate's When the Body Says No book as well, when you're, because I don't really know that much about Pilates, but when you're learning Pilates, are you kind of also releasing the stress of those beliefs as they manifest in your body?
Absolutely, 100%. The body and the mind are one unit. It's not even wrong to call it a connection, because to connect two things, they have to be separate. And actually, the body and the mind are definitely intertwined. I think in more ways than any of us really have any idea of. And when you do Pilates right, you're not just strengthening, and you're not just improving flexibility, and you're not just aligning. You're changing the movement patterns that have formed in the body from very young ages in us, for all kinds of reasons, for all kinds of physical reasons, for traumas, for habitual behavior, things that happen to us in our life, our jobs, our hobbies, even carrying a heavy bag on one shoulder, buying a new pair of shoes, all of these things, and then down to the most tragic of traumas and things that happen to us. They all change the physiology of the body and form the personality. They're very intertwined. So when you start to make changes to the body, to the deep movement patterns in the body, you are making changes to the personality, and you are addressing these things. And obviously it happens very gradually over time. In the apprenticeship program, it doesn't. It happens very quickly because we have to train daily, and those changes manifest themselves very quickly. And it brings up lots of emotions. I mean, I was called Crybaby Jones at the studio because every few weeks, I've had a lot of trauma in my life, and every few weeks I just burst into tears for one reason or another. And and it was just a completely accepted thing. It's like, this is normal. It's going to happen when your body makes a change. Then you have a big release, and it's it's liberating. It's not that dramatic for regular clients, not very often, because they're usually coming once a week. They're really dedicated. Come twice a week, and so the changes are much more gradual. But yes, absolutely, it changes the personality, and it also gives people an awful lot of confidence. I mean, most of the time, when I remember Rebecca Convey, when she was teaching us the apprenticeship, she said a really lovely thing. She said, the fact that your client has come through the door and has said, I have an issue and I really want to change it, that's an amazing step right there, because they're acknowledging that there's something with them that's really bugging them, and they want it to change. They're not accepting it anymore. So the work has already started. The change is already happening before they've even laid down the reformer, and that's a wonderful thing. So actually, I think Pilates, or any exercise practitioner, any physical practitioner, has a huge responsibility on their shoulders to look after the well-being of their client, emotionally, psychologically, but through the physical work. And of course, we're not therapists. That's not my job title. That's not my contract with my client. But it is kind of backdoor therapy for sure. You're working to help them build confidence, to feel better, and of course, movement. When the mobility comes back into their body, when they start to, when pain starts to ease, when they start to feel more aligned and taller and stronger, and when they feel like they can support their own spine, of course their confidence grows. Huge. And then for people who are athletic, or have an artistic or musical endeavor, when their craft is enhanced, that's a massive confidence boost too. So for sure, it's important.
I love all of these different modalities. I find myself completely fascinated and wanting to try all of them. And I think what's really interesting there is that concept of oneness. How it's not just about what we eat, how we exercise, what we think. It is about all of it. But even the right door opens for the right person, and you can still have amazing impact, and good impact, positive impact, just by doing something and choosing to do something and make a change.
Yes, it's so true. And I almost think in a way the modality doesn't matter. It's the point in the person's life when they feel ready to make the change, combined with the practitioner that they meet and something clicking, and then that modality is what expedites the change. I mean, to me, what sets Pilates apart, well, what sets I suppose any exercise method apart really from treatment, because I go, I've been for physiotherapy, and I have osteopathy occasionally. My work's always been very physical. I have massage, I go for treatments. I'm a big believer in acupuncture, homeopathy, all these things. I love them. But a lot of them are quite passive. You go, you have your treatment and you leave, and that's it. And what I really, really love about Pilates is that it's enabling and it's empowering, because it's giving you a method and a way of strengthening yourself. Like, you have to do the work. Your teacher can't do the work for you. They can nudge you here and they can guide you there, but you're the one that has to take responsibility for your own body and say, okay, I want to change. I have to do the work. And then with that's part of the confidence boost as well. I mean, Pilates himself even, took that a step further to how we teach it now a lot of the time. And he made his clients become, very quickly become self-sufficient in the studio. They had to learn how to, do all their own transitions on the equipment. They had to learn how to do the changes themselves. And, he had picture cards and he would point and say, these are the exercises you're going to do, get on with it. And then he just observed them around the studio. Which again is it's a very different method to somebody coming in and you doing everything for them, but we're in a different time as well. And, I think a lot of people nowadays are also utterly exhausted by their everyday living, and they come in for a session, they're paying a lot of money. And actually they want to be nurtured, they want to be looked after. And there's a safety issue too. The equipment, you can hurt yourself with the equipment, and, you need a pair of hands there to make sure you do things safely. And if you are going to transition into being independent, that you do it properly.
Yeah. I think it's about striking the right balance as well, isn't it? Because if, people, I agree, people definitely need nurturing, but they have to be empowered to make their own choices, and to, there's no free rides to anywhere. Nobody can make your fingers move at the piano. You've got to choose to make the move, haven't you? So it's getting that balance right. But that's what being a great teacher is, isn't it? Is reading your pupil and what they need, and adapting to that and to them, and inspiring them, and giving them, holding them accountable, but giving them a space to grow as well.
Yes, exactly. And that's in a way it's easier to achieve with children, because they're a blank canvas. They come to a piano lesson and they know nothing, no preconception. They're just there and they're like, okay, all right, show me what I need to do. For them, I mean, I say that for them, it's harder to get them to implement that into their everyday life. Whereas I think adults have a stronger sense of that. But I think that's just it. It's giving them the space. And I think, what I've learned over the years of teaching, I've been teaching since I was 16, and all throughout music college, that's how I made my money to support my degree, was traveling to people's houses and teaching their children piano. So I've always done it a lot. And the thing that matters the most to me, I think, is just that, is giving them what they need. And that doesn't always mean a doing. Sometimes it means not doing, an active not doing. And actually what I've noticed in the very short time I've been teaching Pilates, which is not long, and I know nothing, I will be a lifelong student of the method. I have so much to learn, and I've just started I hate this word, but I've just started my journey as a teacher. But I've already noticed that a lot of people come in and they work too hard. They try too hard. They want to show me what to do. And you give them an instruction and they do it too much. And actually then they have pain in their back. And they're like, oh, I've got a pain. And why am I feeling pain? And you look at them and they look like they should be, not happy. They look like they're not working very hard. And then suddenly you put your hand on their back and you realize it's absolutely locked, and that they're just tense. every single muscle in their body to do a very simple movement. And, you know, I think the holy grail of the method, I mean, I suppose in anything in life, in music, in rowing, in swimming, and, you know, any activity, the holy grail is finding the transcendental. You know, it's sort of actually, it's feeling at one with your activity and with your own body.
Yes.
One movement.
Yeah.
And then it feels easy.
Yeah.
It feels simple, it feels easy, and it flows. You know, and that's where the Pilates method comes into its own, is that it's about finding that. You know, it's what we're trying to do is put the body in and the mind into balance and finding flow in movement. And that's what's wonderful about it. And it's when you have those moments, you know, myself, I've had them, and when I've seen them a couple of times with my clients, and I say a couple because quite honestly, it's very hard to achieve, you know, but a couple of times I've had it where suddenly something clicks and the client just moves on the equipment, whatever it is that they're doing, and it flows and it's easy for them. And they go, wow, this feels amazing. And that's it. If only we could achieve that every day, but we're human.
Yeah, and you know, that's the beauty of nature, isn't it? Being at one and at ease and going with the flow, and then our minds kick in and disturb the balance and stop us from doing everything, because we start overthinking, overdoing, overanalyzing everything.
Exactly. Our brains get in the way. Animals' brains don't get in the way, and that's
I know exactly. Yeah.
And humans don't.
Yeah. We've been talking for half an hour already. So tell me, we have, time flies, isn't it? I'm just like kind of blown away by the similarities and the overlaps, but actually what it all comes down to, the more and more I speak to people, is about oneness and striving this sort of balance between being and doing and accepting and letting go. And it's themes that just come through in so many parts of our lives. So it's really beautiful to hear it from the perspective of Pilates as well. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And if people would like to get in touch with you, find out more about the method that you use, etc., what would be the best way for them to do that? Sure.
So I have a website. It's pianoandpilatesstudio.com. So you can look me up there. I'm on social media with the same profiles. If you want to find out more about the method, I write a little bit about it on my website, but Romana's Pilates International. So Romana is ROMANA''S. So it says in the name Romana. So Romana's Pilates International. They have a wonderful website. They talk a lot about the method. And Kinetic Pilates in London, my training, you know, where I trained, it also gives an awful lot of information about Joe Pilates, about Romana, and about his wife Clara, and you know how they created and proliferated the method. Fascinating. I'll definitely be taking a look. So thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming and sharing something so like different as well. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Thanks so much, Claire. My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.